The Southern Alberta Council on Public Affairs acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains, and we pay respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationship to the land. We offer respect to the Métis and all who have lived on this land and made Lethbridge their home.
My name is Stephanie Savage, and I am the Alumni and Community Engagement Manager at Lethbridge Polytechnic, and I will be your moderator for today. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains. We pay respect to the Blackfoot people, past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and ongoing relationship with the land. SACPA also offers respect to the Métis and all those who have lived on this land and made this area their home. Today's session will begin with a 25 to 30-minute presentation, followed by a 25 to 30-minute Q&A session, and we'll aim to wrap up around 1 o'clock. Also, today's session is being recorded and will be available on SACPA's website, YouTube channel, and on the Rogers TV community channel. For today, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Brad Donaldson, also my boss, he is the president and CEO of Lethbridge Polytechnic. Dr. Donaldson became the institution's 9th president in August of 2022, bringing over 19 years of senior leadership experience in Alberta post-secondaries. He specializes in shaping organizational strategies, fostering learning cultures, and driving innovation through systems thinking. Dr. Donaldson's career has included leadership roles at SAIT, Red Deer Polytechnic, and numerous academic and business boards. He also spent 20 years in engineering and global manufacturing before moving into academic leadership, which gives him a unique perspective on the evolving needs of both education and industry. He holds a doctorate of education in educational leadership from the University of Calgary, a master's of engineering, and a bachelor's of applied science in chemical engineering from the University of Toronto. Today, Dr. Donaldson will address a timely and important topic. What is the difference between a college and a polytechnic? How long has the change been in the works? How much will it cost? And will it change any of the funding that we currently get? He will also explore what this change means for our applied research teams, for program compatibility, and how we partner with the University of Lethbridge and our soon-to-be-released strategic framework. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Brad Donaldson.
Thank you, Stephanie, and hello to you all. I'm very appreciative when Knud approached me late last year asking if I would come and do this presentation today, so I'm very honored to have been asked and of course very glad to do so. Land acknowledgement has already been taken care of, so we'll move beyond that. What I'd like to show now, system willing, is a video.
At Lethbridge Polytechnic, we know what happens next matters most. Your journey here goes beyond learning. It's about stepping into a career with confidence. You're an innovator, a problem solver, and a leader in the making. You'll be guided by industry experts who have walked the path before you, turning challenges into opportunities. You'll push boundaries, finding real-world solutions to complex problems. We create opportunities for you to discover your path in a program designed to inspire. You'll find a career that's right for you. Every opportunity is a step towards mastering your craft, sharpening your skills for what comes next. You'll become part of our community. It's the connections you'll make, the mentors who will guide you, the peers who will challenge you, and the friends who will stand by you for life. Grounded in the here and now, you will build the future with your authentic self, your determination, and your aspirations. You bring your best, and we bring ours. Together, we prepare you. Together, we shape communities for the better. We are ready for what happens next. We are Lethbridge Polytechnic.
So the first question perhaps is, what actually is a polytechnic? People say you've become a polytechnic, that must be a good thing, but I've really no idea what a polytechnic is. So I'll help explain what that is. It's an institution where the learning is directed towards career outcomes. We have programs in trades, certificates, diplomas, and degrees, but all of those are career preparation. We don't do philosophy or history or things like that. Not suggesting they don't lead to careers, but civil engineering, technology, welding, nursing are career-focused, dedicated programs, and that's what we offer. And, you know, in retrospect, that is really what a college has always offered. And in most cases, some do go beyond that and talk, you know, more about the liberal arts components, but ours is technically focused. So the word polytechnic, poly meaning many, technic meaning technical, many technical offerings is really the root definition of what polytechnic is. What the significant difference is that's happened with Lethbridge Polytechnic over the last 5 years particularly is what's known as applied research. And that is research that's dedicated towards solving industry and business needs today. We're not researching quantum particles or understanding black holes. We're looking at what are the things that happen in our research that helps the community and the industries here. And examples of those would be in agriculture, as you might expect, given where we are. We do a lot of work on irrigation, a lot of applied research on making sure that every drop of water gets to where it needs to go, which, given the circumstances in the last few years around the amount of moisture in this region is very important. Okay, is that better? Okay, thank you. We also look at grain storage. You know, it's one thing to harvest the product, but when you harvest in the fall, the grain doesn't all get consumed in the fall. It gets consumed over the next few months. So you want to make sure that the grain storage is appropriate. So those types of examples are an applied research focus. 5 years ago, there was very little applied research at Lethbridge Polytechnic. We are now the 10th highest funded institution, college or polytechnic in the country. There's been an immense growth. And so the learning of applied research is also, you know, I talk about helping industry improve their capability. We also take that learning and bring it back to the classroom. So our agricultural programs will learn from what's happening in the applied research so that the graduates are moving into the workforce with current today's knowledge. And so the two aspects of those together are what defines a polytechnic and is why we asked for us to be identified as a polytechnic in the Alberta system. So if we look at some of the polytechnic institutions in Canada, we're certainly not the first. It's been around for a number of years, and these are across the country. Some of them are called polytechnic by name. For example, Kwantlen Polytechnic. Seneca College in Toronto has now become Seneca Polytechnic, as has Humber College become. So even though they don't necessarily have the word polytechnic associated with it, they are identified as a polytechnic through a national organization called Polytechnics Canada, which formed, I'm trying to recall, about 15 years ago. So we are now part of a recognized institution nationally within that polytechnic framework. Actually, the one that makes me kind of laugh, where did it go? Red River College Polytechnic. I guess they couldn't decide whether they wanted to be a college or a polytechnic, so they kept them both. But I think we'll see the word college drop off of Red River in the next couple of years. So what have polytechnics been like in Alberta? The Southern Alberta Institute of Technology, Northern SAIT and NAIT have been around for a long time. You know, SAIT's well over 100 years old now. Within the legislative framework in Alberta, the Post-Secondary Learning Act, there is a special section for polytechnics, which is actually quite unique in the country. Up until 2021, SAIT and NAIT were the two polytechnics in the province. In 2021, both Red Deer College and Grand Prairie Regional College changed to Red Deer Polytechnic and Northwestern Polytechnic. And that was the first signal by our government that they were recognizing that polytechnics have a unique space in the learning system. And so when that happened, a little bit before I got to Lethbridge College at the time, there was a move towards saying, you know, we are the same type of institution as Red Deer particularly. We're about the same size, same types of offerings. We need to make sure we're identified as a polytechnic, and I'll get into a little bit of reasons why that is. But nonetheless, we went through a process over kind of from 2021 until last June, when we were given the designation by the Alberta government to, in fact, be identified as a polytechnic. Will there be more? There's sort of rumblings in the system that there may be another institution that will move into that polytechnic space, but we'll see. I talked about the Post-Secondary Learning Act that identifies specifically requirements of a polytechnic. There's difference in the Board of Governors composition in terms of number of public members, numbers of faculty members, but that's kind of, you know, making it work. It doesn't, you know, change what we do. But what it does is that polytechnics must provide apprentice or trades training. Colleges may. So we do that, and we have a very successful apprenticeship program in the country, in the province and the country. In fact, it's seeing significant growth over the last couple of years. Colleges have a regional stewardship responsibility. So within southern Alberta, we have they had a Medicine Hat College and Lethbridge College at the time, both having the same responsibility. So it doesn't necessarily make sense that we've got too much duplication happening. The other one is that polytechnics have a greater scope of authority to grant degrees. And that really defines the difference legislatively, but I've talked about the difference from a practical programming research perspective. To give a little bit of difference about what's the difference between a college and a polytechnic, colleges tend to provide a more broad offering, perhaps into more of the liberal arts types of worlds. And I don't want anybody to be offended by the fact that I'm talking about liberal arts as not being career ready. That's not the case, but I think hopefully you got that understanding that I'm talking about specific career focused programming, not the broad-based type ones. We are applied and industry focused. Every one of our programs has a connection to industry through advisory councils, so we're getting not continuous, but ongoing input from the sectors, healthcare sector, for example, manufacturing, agriculture, have advisory boards to help us understand what the needs are for those programs going forward. In terms of offerings, colleges can offer degrees, but I put it there specifically because we do focus on degrees that are applicable to the workforce. We will never offer, well, I'm saying never, but I don't think ever, we will never offer a Bachelor of Arts in History. But we will offer a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture. We will offer a Bachelor's in Justice Studies, programs that have a very direct link to the careers that those graduates will go into. I talked about the research. Colleges tend to be very limited if they have any research at all. We have a significant amount as a polytechnic. Industry connection I've talked about. We are very highly connected. Every one of our programs has an industry connection so that we're serving the needs of those industry with the skills of the graduates. And the learning style, very much hands-on. Colleges do have hands-on approaches too, but every one of our programs has a connection where the students taking those programs have a real experiential opportunity, whether it be working, doing environmental collections in the field, working in the healthcare system, and so on. So why now? I've talked a little bit about that. Could we have stayed at college and still operated the way we were? Yes, we could have, but we are behaving like a polytechnic. And really what happened, when I gave the history in 2021, when Red Deer and Grand Prairie became polytechnics, it altered the marketplace perception of what post-secondary education is in the province. And we needed to be recognized in the same market space as both Red Deer, Northwestern, of course, Nate and Sate. Because when students are making choices, they're looking at what's happening in the marketplace. If those institutions became polytechnics and Lethbridge didn't, does that mean that we're a different? So they will look at going to an institution based on the name that the institution has. Internationally, Polytechnic has a very strong perspective in many countries. So when students of an international base are looking to come to Canada, they're looking at quite often a polytechnic. So it gives the connection about who we are and what we are to prospective students. And the marketplace is becoming increasingly competitive. Students are becoming quite discerning. I think maybe the point is their parents are becoming quite discerning, because quite often the parents are helping fund the post-secondary of their children. So with the costs of everything the way it is today, we have to make sure that we're representing who we are in the marketplace for prospective students, whether domestic or international. So what's the cost of becoming a polytechnic? There's not an insignificant cost. We do have to make changes. I mean, I'll talk about it. We had our new logo. We've got the billboard out front, which used to have Lethbridge College at the top of it. Well, it doesn't have anything there right now because we are waiting for the new one to be installed. So there are elements that have to be done. Fortunately, in the digital world, the website is where most people will go to understand what's happening at our institution, as with any others. The changes on a website are far easier to make than if we've got numbers of books and publications that have to be out. So there's that aspect of it, and there's business cards, which I've still got about 98 of my 100 business cards I started with, because they're not exactly that common a thing. But there are bits and pieces, and we still see vestiges of Lethbridge College in the colleges, in the Polytechnic as well. So it's not an insignificant component, but it's not a significantly large one either. We will do refreshing of content and material anyway. Putting the new logo on is that. So, I saying a few $100,000 may seem like a lot, but in the grand scheme of our $110 million budget, it's really a marketing cost that we would have to bear anyway. But I balance that by the fact that what is the price we pay by not being a polytechnic? If we're not able to recruit students, if we're not able to engage with industry who provide funding for research because we are not seen as being in that space, the price to not be a polytechnic far exceeds by far the price that it cost us to become a polytechnic. The other question is about funding. Becoming a polytechnic, did we get any more money? Well, I think remember that a penny rounds down to zero now, so that's we can say we got a penny's worth of funding to become a polytechnic. And it's just the nature of the way the provincial government looks at funding. On the one hand, I said, we are a polytechnic, so call us one, and they're saying, well, you are a polytechnic, you don't need any more money. So anyway, we'll see where the funding in Alberta is not based on who you are. It's based on what you got last year. Is there any significant change to what you're doing in terms of operations? We might give you some more money next year, but the trend over the last few years is to be funding less from a government perspective and putting more of that cost towards tuitions. So funding, no. So what's next? Southern Alberta has a very unique place in not only the province, but in the country. If you think about Southern Alberta kind of being, High River South or wherever that magical line of Southern Alberta is, we have a college in Medicine Hat. We have a polytechnic in Lethbridge, we have a university in Lethbridge, and we have an Indigenous college, Red Crow Community College in Standoff. We are looking to form a very tight relationship between these four organizations where we will increase pathways and mobility between students. We will look to brand Southern Alberta as an opportunity to come to and learn from. So that's in early stages. We've had a number of meetings. We've got a draft memorandum of understanding that we're putting together. But this is a very unique proposition. In fact, Lethbridge is quite unique in the size of the city being 110,000 people, to have both a polytechnic and a university serving that size of a community. So let's take advantage of that. Part of our becoming a polytechnic was a very robust discussion with the University of Lethbridge. Their concern was that we would become more degree granting. We're not, and we've really, through a great relationship building between U of L and ourselves, we really understand where we play. What are the lanes that we have? And I've talked about what a polytechnic does. Universities provide a broader range of degrees, and they do research more towards discovery research. And so that's a great, powerful combination. And when I talk about the new programs, we do have one already between ourselves and U of L nursing degree. They do a 2-year diploma at the Polytechnic. They can go into the workplace then, or they can go to U of L either directly or at some point later to complete a degree. We are looking at some other opportunities to provide joint programming going forward, largely in the engineering space. We have a lot of great technical labs and facilities. As the U of L looks towards a potential engineering offering down the road, we've agreed to partner on that. And so that's a first signal that we're looking towards what is the opportunity to leverage the two institutions. Along with Medicine Hat College and Red Crow, what's that full suite of availability and opportunity for students? We will continue, we're going to have a much stronger, probably I'm going to take half an hour, I didn't think I would. I'll leave that for now. And we'll continue to do multidiscipline applied research. Research, we have to go after the funding, and so we have to make sure that we have attractive offerings to secure that funding. So I just want to jump into very quickly, this is a timely meeting today because we're going to launch our new strategic framework next week. We went through a process over the last few months to define who we are as an organization. What's our vision? Really, why do we exist? We exist to prepare learners to be successful in their career choices, that they actually go out and shape the communities that they live and work in. And so it really brought back the essence of our responsibility to the communities that we serve and live in. And you know, I've often been asked the question as well, when you became a Polytechnic, you used to be a community college before Lethbridge College. Does that mean you're no longer involved in the community? Not at all. And I'll talk about, amplify that a little bit more, but our actual purpose, our vision talks about preparing learners to really shape positively the communities they're in. Our mission is how we go about that. We're an organization of learning, opportunity, and belonging. And our values. We spent a lot of time understanding what is it that we value as an organization of the people. And we've identified, and this is through what we are, not what we want to be. We're caring, we're dedicated, and we're responsive. And these are elements that define who we are. As we went through this process, people said, well, what about honesty and integrity? Well, if you don't have honesty and integrity, you shouldn't be in the game in the first place. They shouldn't uniquely define who you are as an institution. These ones do. I'm not going to go into great detail on these, but in order to achieve our vision, what are the imperatives that we must focus on? And imperatives are the things we must do, not the things we'd like to do or we'll try to do. We have to do this. We have to provide exceptional student experiences in the classroom, in their work learning places, in the supports we give them, in the athletics opportunities for them, the full suite of experiences that when a graduate leaves, they said, well done. You have served me well in terms of my growth as an individual. Dynamic responsive programs, I alluded to a little bit before that, but we have to make sure we're continually providing programs that industry is looking for. What's artificial intelligence going to do to every sector over the next forever, perhaps? We'll make sure the programs are around that. What are the other emerging technologies that we have to think about? But emerging technologies are also in existing fields. We offer civil engineering technology. It's different than it was 20 years ago. It'll be very different 20 years from now. So our programs have to evolve. We can't be static on that. If you don't have a great employee culture, you're not going to deliver on the first two. And deliberate community connections. That became out very clear through our discussions as we built our strategic framework. We are an integral part of the Lethbridge community. And we can't just be takers, meaning we will take your students, we'll take your money for tuitions. We're also an employer, a significant employer in the city. But we also have an obligation to help Lethbridge become the best place it can be. So how can we serve the community because we are such an integral part of that? What about sustainability? A lot of organizations have a sustainability goal or imperative. It underlies everything we do. We will not do anything that compromises sustainability, whether it be environmental, social, or economic. And those elements pervade every decision that we make. Quickly, our new logo. You may have seen it around, but it's a little bit different than we had in the past. Maintains the same green-blue transition, representing the transition of people as you transition through your career at Lethbridge College. I almost got I'm about a 99.4% hit rate on not saying college anymore, but every once in a while, when my train of thought is down the road, it does so. I'll take my hit. It represents the evolution of us as well. The colors and the circle represents inclusion. You see, we talked about caring and belonging in our values and mission. The circle represents inclusion. We want to include everybody. We want everybody who comes to the Polytechnic to be successful, to feel valued and wanted, and that's employees, students, visitors, whoever's there. The outer circle, a TP ring, reflects the community that we live in, the Blackfoot community and all Indigenous communities. So we want to make sure that's reflected in how we're seen. And just the bold, you'd be surprised how much time was spent on picking font. And whether it should be capital or bolded. Anyway, I think it represents us well.
So now we will start our Q&A. If you have questions, we would ask that you line up on the wall so that you can come up and ask your questions at the podium. When it's your turn, please state your name, and then try to keep your preamble short, but ask your focused, topical question. After asking your question, please return to your seat so that Dr. Brad Donaldson can answer your question. We will only be taking questions from the podium. We will not be taking the questions from the floor. If no one is in line, I've been scribbling some questions there that I'll hit Brad with, so don't worry, I will keep the discussion going if need be. So let's get started. We have our first question.
Thanks a lot, Brad. My name is Rob Miyashiro. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very informative. So the question I have, you made a comment about trying to meet industry needs. And the question is about the, I guess, the future of the wind turbine technician program that you have, given that our current government has pretty much stopped wind turbine farm development for renewable electricity in our province. So can you answer that and the fate of that? And the reason why it's so important, should be so important to all of us, is that we have a public service economy in Lethbridge, and for good or bad, and the more or the fewer students that we have coming into Lethbridge to attend university and college, it really affects our economy in the whole city. So it's a concern.
Yeah. This is why Knut comes every day. Right? Great question, Rob. But it speaks to the question really reflects every program that we offer. There's got to be demand on two sides. First of all, students have got to want it, and they've got to have employers who will hire them on the outside of that. So whether it be wind turbine or any other program, we have an obligation to ensure that we're achieving that need. So right now there's student demand for wind turbine. So as long as the student demand is there, and that translates to employer demand down the road, we do that to balance. I mean, that's part of the dynamic responsive programming. We don't do buggy whip anymore because that industry, well, big one time doesn't exist anymore. The same approach applies to every program that we offer. Is there student demand to warrant running the program? And is there employer demand that we will take the tuition of the student and say, we'll educate you, knowing that there's a high probability they will find work? So it's always the balance of that.
Hi, thanks for your talk. My name's Dave Major, and you talked about the cooperation among the 4 academic institutions. I'm wondering how much interaction you have with the 2 federal research stations, which, at least in the past, had a substantial number of highly trained professionals. So, and if there are impediments to those, could you talk about those two, like to cooperating with the federal government?
Oh, great questions. Our relationship with the research comes through our applied research group. And so that's the connection between the research community, as Dave just mentioned, and how we're working with them. So, Prairies Canada, for example, we're tightly connected with them. I think the essence of the answer, though, is the funding in place for those research organizations. They're largely federally funded, although there are provincial fundings as well. And so our ability to connect with those organizations depends on how well funded those are. Because most of our applied research funding comes through those agencies. So the connections are tight, and we're hoping to see continued research in those areas. You know, think about Canada's productivity problem that's been in media a lot over the last year or so. Canada's productivity is falling as a nation as one of the G7 countries. We've got to make sure that the productivity and research is focused in the areas that are going to grow the economy. So the connections are good now, and I hope they continue to be.
Hi, my name is Henning Mundel. I have a couple of questions. One is, okay, so Lethbridge College became Lethbridge Polytechnic, and a number have, but for example, Mount Royal College became Mount Royal University. So my question is, are there more colleges that became polytechnics in Alberta or became universities? And then you mentioned about giving a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture, which I actually got 61 years ago, but from UBC. But the University of Lethbridge gives those now. Do you have already a relationship between the degree, starting at the college and university, or exchanging of courses and so on? And then thirdly, if I may, just quickly, polytechnics have been around in one form or another, and I originally come from Germany, where the Technische Hochschule, the TH, I think is sort of what is a polytechnic. I have a grandfather who 99 years ago got a degree in chemical engineering from TH Karlsruhe in Germany. I just wonder, is that sort of comparable?
Yes. Try to wrap that all together. I think I lost the train of thought. Yeah, so there is the relationship between ourselves and the U of L, which is a strengthening and growing one. Just help me with the...
Our degree is in agronomy, where
Sorry.
they have the...
Yeah, yes. So we will, part of the agreement, what I should have mentioned more, or better, when we went on the Polytechnic road to get that designation, we had to work very closely with U of L. They were concerned that we would start eating into the degree space, which is theirs, and we unequivocally will not. We will only ever offer a unique degree that isn't already offered in the region, because it wouldn't make sense. Why would I offer something that's already offered across the coulee, so to speak, and dilute both of our programs? It'll be very focused. So part of our trajectory now is, how do we work together to supplement? Why would I go and develop a degree at Lethbridge Polytechnic without consideration of what's at the University of Lethbridge? Meaning there could be content and courses that they already teach that supplement what we are. So we're getting into an era, I believe, of much higher integration and collaboration in the region. But having said that, we're not going to go running down the degree road, to be quite honest. It would only be if it was really there. I can give you the background. SAIT brought its first degrees in 2010 in Bachelor of Business Administration, Bachelor of Science in Construction Project Management. So that happened almost 15 years ago. They've introduced one degree since then. A Bachelor of Information Technology. So we're focused on making sure the degree is unique and focused in an area that needs it, that doesn't currently have one. I hope I got the essence of oh, Mount Royal, yeah. So the evolution, yeah, Mount Royal College and MacEwan College in Edmonton both became universities. I'm not quite, I was kind of new in the system at that point, so I'm not quite sure what the impetus was, other than providing greater opportunity, perhaps.
Hi, my name's Tom Moffat. I was wondering what the impact is of, you say you're coordinating closely with industry to develop your courses. And I was wondering how regional that is, because in Alberta there are as Rob mentioned, issues with things like wind turbine construction. So what are the environmental courses like? Can you take a degree or a diploma in environmental sustainability, or has industry turned the focus away from that in Alberta? Do you offer things that will lead to jobs in like other provinces or in the United States, or only in this region?
A great question, and that's often one of the questions that, are we educating people for our community, or are we educating people for the world? And the answer is yes. I think the aspect of mobility of labor or workers is significant. So a lot of our content is driven around broad fields of study. The question around how do we connect with industry? Well, the advisory councils we work with national councils on technology and so on, so that we're getting as much input as possible. It's ever evolving, and that's one of the challenges that we do face. But I think we have an obligation to ensure that our students' careers change very fast now. A graduate in any program will go into a field that's rapidly changing. Part of our obligation is to ensure that they have those resilience and transferability skills as well. That they're learning, I'll use civil engineering technology again, they're learning the techniques of civil engineering technology, but they're also learning about creativity and problem solving, that as their careers shift, as their industries shift, they're able to shift along with it. So, keeping current, I'll be honest, is one of the challenges we do face. The world is shifting really, really fast. And how do we make sure our graduates, that we're getting the input from the industries about where they're seeing their industries going. And I use the word industry in a broad sense. It could be healthcare, social work. We don't do social, but childcare, education, and so on. How do we make sure we're keeping current? And that's one of those community connection imperatives is around doing that.
My name is Mark Gettle. I feel that the average high school student graduate is no longer ready for university. And for instance, at the end of the 60s, Quebec instigated their collegiate program, the SAGE program, where after high school you went to 3 years to get a trade or 2 years as pre-university. And I think the college served that same role here. Many high school students would go and get their diploma at the college and then head on to the university. They were trained a little bit better because high school to university is tough for immature students, especially we have now. So I'm just wondering, now that you're going to be focusing on trades, will that leave a void for that student who'd like to go into university but needs that springboard, like a 2-year college, not polytechnic type training?
No, great question. And one of the challenges we do face as a learning institution is the changing capability of the incoming students. Particularly, we're still dealing with the post-COVID effect. So a lot of the students coming into Polytechnic have gone through all or part of their education, or most of it, through the online during their highly developmental years. So there are some challenges in terms of that. But trades is one component of what we do. We're planning for about 1,200 trade students, which translates, because they're there for a shorter period of time, to about 300 full-time students. We have 4,500 full-time students, so the largest body of students are, in fact, the ones that you talk about that are coming to a learning environment outside of the trades. And your point is absolutely well taken. We have a number of students who started in the university, didn't find that learning style was good for them, came to the Polytechnic, and were successful. And quite often, and my daughter's an excellent example. She did a 2-year diploma at Olds College and then came to U of L to complete her degree. If she had started at U of L, her success rate would have been significantly lower than that. And so we do provide, that's one of the values of Polytechnic or college environments in terms of their size of classrooms, the industry-focused instructors. All of our instructors have actually worked in the industry that they're teaching in. They haven't, this is not disparaging to the university stream, they have their purpose and their pathways. But smaller classrooms, greater direct interaction with your instructor, we believe is one of the cores to our success. And our approach is we want everyone who comes to us to be successful. And that's why I talk about the student experience, that we will do what we can to help the student succeed, whereas the university, it's probably still being recorded, I gotta be careful what I say here, but the university has a system that is appropriate for certain people. The Polytechnic has a system that's appropriate for certain type of learners. Some learners can go into a 300, 400 classroom lecture hall and be successful. Some can. So the one thing that network I talked about, Medicine College, Polytechnic, U of L, provides multiple pathways where students can choose the pathway that is appropriate for them.
Well, you've just hit on the very fact that for background, I taught for 25 years at the college, at the Polytech. A lot of the people who were teaching there, as you say, were very, very good in their own fields. Might be carpentry, might be welding, might have been people who stopped working in the fields and went back and were environmental science instructors. But if you want to go heavily into this joint thing of the degree, those instructors don't have PhDs, so how does the university feel about that kind of form of training? And secondly, what does the faculty think about this? Because there's going to be a total rewriting of the kind of, because there'll be a program switch completely. And I know how much time it takes to do plans for this. What's their feedback been?
Great question, and that's one of the questions we grappled with when I was at SAIT and bringing in degrees is university professors almost exclusively have a PhD or a graduate degree of some form. And the requirement, Campus Alberta Quality Council is the body that oversees degree granting in the province. And quite often what you need is the credential above the one you teach typically to be taught. So we don't need to have PhDs teaching at the Polytechnic in order to deliver a university level course. We have to make sure we have the right credentials of the individual, but it doesn't require the PhD. How do our faculty feel about it? Quite well. We actually do offer degrees now. We offer the Bachelor of Justice, the Bachelor of... so we do have those folks in there teaching that now. As I mentioned, we're not going to go rampant down the degree path. If we decide or determine through market analysis we have to have another degree, we'll work very closely with the faculty that are there now to understand whether they're capable, based on their background and their credential, to teach in that program. If not, we would look to hire. No, the degree wouldn't be a replacement. I mean, if they're already teaching in a program, as long as that program is viable, there's no impact on them. When we bring in something new, we want it to be incremental.
Goodness. Leona Jacobs. My curiosity has to do with this applied research piece. And there's a saying that they who pay the piper call the shots or call the tune, right? And so you had mentioned industry funding, and so I'm wondering to what extent does industry funding fund the research that's going to be taking place, and to what extent are there provisions to maintain the independence of the results from what industry might be wanting to call the tune for?
That's a great question. It's always about when you're doing the research, who owns the output, who controls the content. Most of our funding comes through either provincial or federal bodies. And within that agreement, when we apply for it, either apply directly or respond to a request for application, there are provisions around the scope. And quite honestly, we do have a significant degree of autonomy in terms of how we go about the research and how we conduct the research and who is responsible for the findings. When it comes to industry, that's usually on a more of a one-to-one relationship, that a company will come to us and say, I'll provide you with so much money. What can you find out about that? And again, in that case, there's very little control because they're asking us to solve a problem for us. If they knew the answer to the problem, they wouldn't come to us in the first place. So I'm very comfortable with the degree of autonomy we've got around who directs what the research is, what the outcomes are, and where the dissemination is. The intellectual property ownership typically resides with us, even though we've been funded by someone else. If it's an industry agreement, the intellectual property might go to them just because they funded it.
Hi, my name is Knut Petersen. Thanks very much for coming to give us a good explanation about the name change. As you may know, Lethbridge College had a name change before that. It used to be called LCC, which many people took as Last Chance College. And I have a feeling that was a contributing factor to the name change to Lethbridge College. On that note, could you provide a little bit of info, whether you have any evidence or not, about losing students to Red Deer Polytechnic and Grand Prairie Polytechnic? Is that one of the main reasons that you applied to become a polytechnic? And a second question is related to the Lethbridge Kodiaks, which I happen to be quite enthused about. How much of a financial drain on the Lethbridge Polytechnic is Kodiak athletics?
Well, there's a loaded question. So let me go. Let me do the last question first. How much of a drain is it on? It's not a drain. It's definitely. So often we use the word cost versus investment. Sure, there's a cost to running the programs, but as I talked about the Polytechnic, there's a cost to not running the programs. We attract high caliber students by virtue of the fact we have athletics. And it's been proven time and time again that strong athletes are strong academics as well. It's very rare that you see somebody come into an athletic venture, whether it be basketball, volleyball, soccer, or whatever, but aren't also very attuned in athletics and academics. So I don't see it as a cost. So if you're worried about, the future trajectory being, we got to save money, we're going to get away with it, move our athletics, don't worry about that. Bringing in more, adding a national cost. I keep getting asked to bring in a hockey team. Hockey is one of the most expensive sports you can ever bring into a post-secondary. So I said, everybody's got to shoot the same way so that when they change shifts, they change sticks too. So that, do we know how many are leaving the region to go to Red Deer Polytechnic or Grand Prairie? We don't have great data on that, to be quite honest. But the data we do have, and one of the challenges we're trying to turn around in this region, is the transition rate of students completing high school going into post-secondary. Right now, that number, and it's over 4 years after high school graduation, has that student come into post-secondary. It's only 31% of high school graduates in this region go into post-secondary. Now, some of them will go into the trades or apprentice, and that number doesn't capture that. But even if it's 3 or 4%, that still says that 2/3 of students completing high school are not going in to further their education in a formal way. And maybe some shouldn't. Some find acceptable careers and lives without doing that. I'm not suggesting everybody should. But our challenge, and part of and I probably should have mentioned that, is from a recruitment. By being a polytechnic, our hope is that we elevate the image of our institution by the name change and underlying reasons, that we can start to move that trajectory a little higher. Alberta as a whole isn't great. Calgary and Edmonton are either 39 or 40, one or the other. I can't remember which one is which, but even still, that's not a lot. Historically, that's been driven by the oil and gas sector, that you could get a very high-paying job if you're willing to slug a wrench and go and work in minus 40 degrees and so on. But that's shifting a little bit. The oil and gas sector is much more technically advanced than it was 20 years ago. So one of the questions we're trying to figure out is, where are they going? Where are these 67 out of 100 students, where are they going? They may be leaving the province, but I don't think most people don't leave the province to go for education, although we do get some coming in from Alberta, from BC and Saskatchewan. But I really think that's the opportunity, because I fundamentally believe, and it's why I came to the post-secondary education system, that education is a pathway to improved lives. People who aren't educated have less opportunity. Some are very successful, but if you don't have an education, your opportunities are limited. I use my career as an example. I started off as an engineer, and if you'd told me when I graduated I'd be doing the job I'm doing today, once I stopped laughing, I would say, yeah, right. But my education gave me pathways that didn't exist if I hadn't had my education. And no matter what your education is, it does provide pathways. And so one of the things and we're working with Lethbridge School Board, we're meeting in a couple of weeks to try and understand what is happening with the high school students that they're not transitioning. How can we help that happen? So we think about the communities that we serve. If you don't graduate high school, there's a higher probability you're going to be on welfare, you're going to get into addiction problems, you're going to be a drain on society, for lack of a better term. Whereas if you have some level of education, you have that opportunity to grow yourself, to grow your life, but also to contribute positively to the community, or if not positively, at least not negatively. So that's really what drives behind why I do what I do.
Hi, Brad, favorite employee. 2 quick questions. One is, now that we've moved into the work-integrated learning world and we see an increase in that, do we ever see an opportunity for traditional co-op programming to enter into what we do at Lethbridge Polytechnic? Question 1. And then question 2, back to the Kodiaks. When Red Deer transitioned to a polytechnic, we saw that they were able to recruit and retain higher caliber athletes and become more competitive. Do you think that we will see the same growth in our own athletics programmings now that we've made that transition? And how can we capitalize on that for athletics purposes?
Why does everybody ask more than one question? Because I forget the first question by the time I'm thinking of the second one. Co-op. Work integrated learning that Stephanie references, that each program has an element where the students can go and practice in the field. They can spend a bit of time in a facility where they're learning or practicing what they learn. It's not a true co-op, where a co-op is you would spend a semester here, go and work for a semester. Very successful. University of Waterloo is probably the world leader in doing that. The challenge is you need critical mass to do that. Do we have enough places where we could say that we have a class of 36 whoever's? Is there 36 placements available on an ongoing basis? That's a bit of a challenge we have. Lethbridge is great in terms of having a tight community. The downside is we don't necessarily have a lot of those large employers or enough employers that could make that happen. If we can make it work, I'd love to, but I think there's some limitation there. Athletics, US.
Recruiting higher caliber athletes like we saw other polytechnics.
Yeah, I'm hoping that's an outcome of that. If part of the rationale for becoming a polytechnic was to increase our recruitability or our desire to be. I would hope that the same would happen for athletics as well. We'll see.
Thank you very much for your talk. You mentioned your polytechnic goals of educating people to deal with local issues. Oh, my name is Bev Mundell-Atherstone. Sorry. You mentioned your polytechnic goals of educating people to deal with the local issues as well as the world. And you also mentioned that Alberta water shortage has driven additional research to deal with our drought. So I'm wondering, with the coal mining by the Australian company called Northback, estimates about 1 billion liters of water will be used to mine coal at the proposed 3 by 6 mile open pit mine, with the effluent seeping into our Old Man River. Now, next door to where this mine will be built is the Elk Valley mine owned by Teck. And they have agreed to drill new freshwater wells in Sparwood, which has had to close their freshwater wells due to selenium contamination by the mine. So what applied research will the Lethbridge Polytechnic be conducting to ensure that our Old Man River remains selenium-free, and for what what programs will you, do you have or will you have to monitor and protect our water from coal mines?
Well, the questions get harder. The research that we get involved with, Bev, is the research that is funded. We have to apply for funding opportunities. If there's no funding available, we don't have the resources to say, yeah, we're going to explore that. It'd be nice if we had sort of that pot of money where we could go and say, let's deal with an environmental challenge. The route for that, though, is if we feel it's an issue, then we will lobby towards the funding agencies, whether it be Alberta Innovates, NSERC, which is the national group. The opportunity is for the communities to drive that demand, in as much as, you know, if selenium is going to be a challenge for the water, which quite possibly could be, and selenium is nasty stuff, the communities are the greatest opportunity to leverage that interest. If it's, you know, it's around the politics of funding. How do you, if you want to deal with a problem, you have to ensure that those that are responsible for dealing with the problem have the funding available to them. This is likely to become a very politically charged discussion. So the opportunity there is for the communities to work with their politicians to drive the demand for that concern to bring in the funding. Yeah, I'd love to say that every opportunity that presents us we could go after, but we have our challenges in terms of what we can go after because of the funding available.
Thank you, Brad. I'm Ian Hurdle. I want to thank you for a big smile you gave me. I haven't seen a moderator before that you supplied and brought a big time clock along.
I forgot my phone.
We put a band on that?
Played with play.
Okay. Anyway, I have 5 children that did the university way, and the 5th one actually, after a degree, went to the college.
Thank you.
My question is really 2 prongs. There's a program called Geomatics, which is gone, and I want to insight how you adjust for that, and then engineering technology and how it might advance to a professional degree.
Yeah, great question on the geomatics. You know, I've got to balance responsibilities, making sure that we have the programs that provide solid graduates for the field they're going into, and the financials of delivering that. And the challenge with, you know, the funding and so on is that we run fairly tight. We can't afford to run programs that have, going back to what I talked about before, if there's lack of student demand and there's lack of employer demand, we can't run the program. And the challenge with that program and others over time is that we simply can't afford to run programs that are very costly. For example, our class sizes are typically 30 to 36. When we have classes, the only enrollment of only 7 students, that becomes a challenge for us. So I've got to balance the cost of running a very inefficient program versus reallocating resources where there's wait lists for students. So it's that constant shift, and that's one of the challenges we're going to face going forward, Ian, is that as industries change quickly, how do we make sure we're responding appropriately to, you know, talking like an engineer now, optimize my output of students into the marketplace given the funding and resources we've got available to us.
Okay, as we near 1 o'clock, we're going to have our final question, and then we will have Dr. Brad Donaldson come up, provide some final words, and then I'll close us off with a lovely dance or something.
Hi, my name is Justin Ellis, and when I did my diploma in architecture through SciAst in Saskatchewan, I had to choose between working my job during the day or going to school. Is Lethbridge Polytechnic a 9-to-5 type business, or have you started offering people who need to work during the day opportunities to attend school in the evenings and the weekends for your core courses? There's lots of competition around the globe now. The Harvard Extension offers 4-credit classes in the evening. I'm a beneficiary of some of that. If I were to have taken communication classes from you, I might have had to quit my job to do so. There are families, even though they're double income, are barely scraping by. If they wanted to increase their income by going to school and getting some sort of higher education, right now a 9-to-5 offering means that they're going down to one income and perhaps giving up a job that are getting hard to come by, or they're having to, even if they can get by with one income, now they got to put a kid into daycare. So how are you removing barriers for people to improve their quality of life using the buildings that are paid for, heated, lit, that are available 24/7?
No, it's a fantastic question, and one we're still grappling with, because you're absolutely right. You know, we want to be able to provide the education when the students, the learners, can actually participate. And there are a number of situations like that where I can't come between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday, or Monday or Friday, or whatever the case may be. Part of our dynamic program strategy is looking at what is the opportunity to provide elements of that learning that happen outside of the regular work. Certain, online courses can be done, but we have to think about a lot of our programs have hands-on, have labs. So how do we accommodate the labs on either evenings or weekends, going back to what I talked about, in a manner that we can afford to do so? It's a very delicate tension that we try to sort out, and I'm hoping that we can find that solution, because more and more people, I believe, are going to be in the situation that you just talked about, given economic circumstances and what the case may be, that the sort of the traditional delivery model of Monday to Friday, come during the day, is not going to work for everybody. So I've got to, with my team, is figure out how do we do that in a manner that we can cost effectively do it, and provide that learning opportunity. It's a fantastic question. Yeah. And Ian, I think I missed one of your questions. You talked about, I think, transfer of, pardon?
Progression from engineering technology to a professional engineer.
Anybody who's been associated with a PEGA probably knows there are certain rules and regulations around technologists versus engineers. So the space for engineering sits within the university system right now. The opportunity is for that civil engineering technologist to then move into a university with recognition of that engineering technology learning and do that. So that's the progression that would have to happen. I can give you an example. When I was at SAIT, we actually had 6 engineering technology programs that bridged into U of C to get an energy engineering degree. So there are examples of pathways that exist now. Depending where U of L goes and our relationship with them and U of C, U of A, which are the other engineering degree granting bodies in the province, looking at that opportunity. And my boss just told me that I have my closing messages. So I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk. I like to get every opportunity I can to talk about what the Polytechnic is, what we're headed, where we're going. But I equally value the questions that come, because it really helps me understand the perspective of this community, with your experience and understanding, that I need to consider. The questions around technology to engineering, how do we accommodate people's lives now that they can't come when it's the daytime? Just the thoughts around the research and the compromising of integrity around that. The questions are as informative to me as I hope the answers are to you. So I thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I thank you for my opportunity to learn from you as well.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I said a dance or something, so I'll hit the something instead of the dance, because no one wants to see me dance. As our alumni engagement manager, I have a couple pieces of info that I think might be interesting for you all. Based on some of the questions, I was writing down some notes. So we do have 55,000 alumni across the world. But what's interesting about us versus a traditional university sector is about 70% of our grads end up staying in Southern Alberta and contributing back to the industry that we have here. So our last alumni survey showed that 70% stayed within Calgary's south border to contribute back to industry here. But we also have grads that land in Japan and the US and things like that. So we do really have that global approach, but more so that really strong community approach to how our grads actually benefit the region we live in. So I just wanted to share that, which I thought was interesting based on some of the conversation. And then there were a lot of questions about environmental sustainability. And we do have 3 really great environmental sciences programs at Lethbridge Polytechnic. And from getting those alumni updates and job notifications, we do have a lot of people working in renewable resources and in environmental assessment programming. So we are contributing in the real world to those, despite maybe not having the opportunity to look at all of those through our research lens. But our students are absolutely contributing in those fields. Perfect. Now, don't tempt me. Now, I just wanted to give another thank you to Brad for all of the information you shared with us today. It was really informative, even as someone who works in the institution, to hear some of the questions that you guys were asking and then to hear some of the things Brad was able to share was really informative, even for someone who lives it every day. So thank you very much. We hope to see you all next week for Ilmar Altazar's talk on plant protein farming. So thank you all for being here today, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and grab a magazine on your way out.